Number 10. Pork Grind. Pork Grind apparently has the same powers as Eddie Brock, anti-hero, and Venom of the 616 reality, but he also is a wild boar. And not even the wild kind of wild boar, more like a wild boar from a cartoon animated universe, where reality is warped somewhat due to everyone living like a toon. Think Toontown from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This is the home universe of alternate Spider-Man Spider-Ham, who is a pig. You may remember Spider-Ham from the animated film Into the Spider-Verse, but there are all sorts of toon-like animal folk as well, including this boar version of Venom. Number 9. Hybrid. While any of the 4 symbiotes that make up Hybrid are considered pretty tame, the 4 of them together is a little less tame. The cool thing about Hybrid is it combines the abilities and power sets of 4 of the Life Foundation symbiotes: Agony, Riot, Phage, and Lasher. However, there is also an element of weakness in their union. These symbiotes prefer being together because they are kind of like a little family unit and know that it makes them stronger ultimately. So break Hybrid up, separate its components, and not only will these symbiotes be weaker overall, but they also probably will be emotionally not great either, because they don't really like when you split them up. They don't like forced breakups. This kind of gives Hybrid an extra weakness in comparison to the standard Sound and Fire ones. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more symbiote lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Maniac. Mania, or Maniac as they were later known, is a symbiote that split off from Venom due to some crazy going-ons, which we'll actually dive into more later on this list. Mania, as it was known then, bonded to Andy Benton, a friend of Flash Thompson's who also happened to be a student at the time. This is back when Flash was a substitute gym teacher. Flash thought he was just sending a part of his own symbiote to Andy, but it was revealed that this part of Venom was its own thing, and it became known as Mania. Mania was pretty powerful while bonded with Andy, but as a symbiote on its own, it possessed just your average standard set of powers, making it not really very strong in comparison to some of the most powerful ones out there. Maniac was the name the symbiote became known by when it left Andy and was taken by the criminal Lee Price. Later on, Maniac would be killed in the Absolute Carnage event and absorbed. Number 7. Agony. Agony is one of the 4 Life Foundation symbiotes which were forcefully harvested from the Venom symbiote while it was their prisoner. Poor Venom and Eddie. And poor baby symbiotes. Poor symbiotes. The Life Foundation acknowledged that Agony was still too young to control a host, and so bonded it initially to a security officer with the Life Foundation. I assume to kind of help combat Agony's lack of experience. What is unique about Agony? While not as powerful as their parent Venom, they were given enhanced muscles by the government, making them one of the physically strongest of the 5 symbiotes that were harvested, and they can spit acid as well as absorb other chemicals to later use themselves. So it's not nothing, but it's nothing as crazy as what some symbiotes are capable of. Number 6. Payback Variant. This symbiote wasn't a symbiote in the same way as the ones from Clintar are. It instead was a being of pure electromagnetic energy that bonded with S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Mavis Trent. We don't know much about this new alien symbiotic species, but we do know that it bonding with Trent resulted in her getting superpowers and a cool new silver form that she could access whenever she was in a state of bliss or extreme joy or happiness. While this is a really cool idea for a character, symbiote, and design, the fact remains that the Payback symbiote was not as powerful as the ones that we usually see from Clintar. It did however come with some superhuman boosts to strength, speed, durability, and a healing factor. It also allowed Trent the power to fly and some cool electromagnetic and telepathic powers. Still, no shapeshifting and probably not as strong as someone like Venom or Carnage.
At number 5 we have Tarna's symbiote. In her normal form, Tarna is a Skrull who used a symbiote to protect the cosmos as an agent of the cosmos. She makes it her duty to follow Flash Thompson's Venom around to gauge if he would have what it takes to be an agent of the cosmos as well. But something goes wrong during a confrontation with Flash and Tarna is seemingly killed. Quite easily too. She eventually returns and is then taken over by one of Null's symbiotes. So if we're gonna count this second instance as her most notable time bonded with a symbiote, it is a pretty minor event, much like the encounter with Flash Thompson. Nothing against the character, Tarna is great, but her time as a symbiote might be left out of some conversations because her usual symbiotic form was with one of her own unnamed symbiotes. And then further because her time with one of Null's symbiotes was so brief. But there's no doubt that she's considered a symbiote host regardless. At number 4 is Dr. Octopus. During the events of Superior Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus becomes infected by Venom after a confrontation with Flash Thompson. This iteration of Venom is so cool and actually quite powerful, having contended and arguably beaten Superior Spider-Man in their most notable encounter of the storyline. He also faces off against and actually contends with the Avengers, although they luckily are able to subdue him and take him into custody after the fight. I'm not going to say that Doc Ock is forgotten as one of the Venom hosts, but he definitely isn't referenced enough considering his pretty impressive run with the symbiote, and the naturally cool look of the creature, not to mention. At number 3 is Angelo Fortunato. This symbiote host is often forgotten because of his short and rather insignificant run with the Venom symbiote. After Eddie Brock sells off Venom at an auction, which I think is just an insane thing to do, but I digress, and basically Angelo's father buys it, his goal is to make something of his son, who had always been ridiculed by his peers. When Angelo pairs with Venom, he immediately loses control and attacks the school where Peter Parker works as a teacher, and he even kills a former classmate of Peter Parker in the process. But Spider-Man fights back and beats him pretty badly, leaving Venom to retreat. But as they're leaping off the side of the building, Venom actually abandons Angelo right there and then, deeming him too cowardly to be able to take on the Venom symbiote. This actually causes a lot of guilt for Eddie Brock, understandably. Despite this story being pretty action-packed, it's also short-lived and Angelo is often forgotten as a result. It could also be due to the fact that he was a bit overshadowed by Eddie and ultimately Venom's next host after him. At number 2 is Wolverine. Wolverine is often forgotten as a host of Venom because the symbiote doesn't stay with him for long, quickly switching over to Patricia Robertson immediately after. But Wolverine's quick stint with Venom in Canada was actually the second time he'd been bonded with a symbiote. The other time was during the Vietnam War when Wolverine was working alongside Nick Fury to track down a group of infected soldiers. These two instances are small footnotes in the grand storyline of the Venom symbiote, but they are legitimate nonetheless. Wolverine has just been around for so long that maybe we're all just used to him having epic run-ins like these at this point. But for a time, there's a wild combo here that gives us a pretty powerful version of Venom with adamantium claws and possibly some augmented healing powers to boot. And at number 1 is Pavitr Prabhakar. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. Living on Earth 50-101, this version of Peter Parker is established in India and has a whole storyline similar to Earth 616. But in the case of Pavitr, Venom comes to him as a result of a curse from an ancient amulet that attempts to take him over in the same way that Venom might. He's partly consumed by an ancient guardian that changes him into what looks like a Venom with big tusk-like fangs. But soon after, he's able to shatter the amulet and banish this Venom-like monster for good. This character is barely ever acknowledged when listing symbiote hosts, and it may just be due to his storyline not being so popular, at least with Western audiences. Although if you love this storyline, I'm sorry, I know there are also fans out there. But it just seems that this host doesn't get much recognition very often. Maybe it's because the symbiote is never referenced as an actual symbiote in the story, it's only referred to as an ancient being. So maybe people just don't consider it to count as a version of Venom? I think it counts though. I think it's just Venom. They're just in a different storyline. Let me know what you think.
Kicking off the list at number 10, May Parker, Earth X. Venom from Earth 9997, aka May Parker, is quite unique when it comes to taming the symbiote. In Jim Krueger's Earth X run from 1999, May Parker chose not to keep her fantastic abilities passed on to her a secret. She embraced them, which is something I would do, I think. She was actually trained by Uncle Matt Murdock that is, to use her spider sense as if it's a radar. Things were going swimmingly until she became the target of the symbiote, the same symbiote that had been used by her father years prior. Peter rejected the symbiote at first, so now it was a little upset, and it swore revenge on the Parkers. It left an older Eddie Brock and made its way to May. Thing is, when the symbiote did bond to May, her spider sense training came in handy, and she was able to subjugate the symbiote and take control. We love a hot start, but it might get worse. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and tap the thumbs up, if you want to, no pressure, but it really does help us out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you for your support. Let's get back to this list. Number 9, Kingpin Venom. If I took one look at this guy in real life, I'd probably throw up out of fear. Wilson Fisk, straight out of Earth TRN 421, appeared in the 100th anniversary special Spider-Man issue 1 back in 2014. A rich guy who wants power. Where else to look than to get your fat sausage fingers on a symbiote? That's exactly what Kingpin did. In fact, he upgraded it. That's right, he added techno-organic improvements to the symbiote that gave him access to any and all tech on the planet. And that includes your recently deleted, so you might want to go check those are gone. When Eddie Brock and Peter Parker were duking it out, they both came to a conclusion that they should just destroy the symbiote. But that's when Kingpin came along and kidnapped the two. Great idea, guys, just a little too late. I love Kingpin Venom. When he's chasing Peter down, he's controlling tech and using it against him. It really is the worst case scenario for Pete. Peter managed to escape the beast by luring him into the woods and starting a fire. There he was able to get the symbiote off of him. See, normally forest fires are a thing you try and avoid, but in this case, with the whole tech stuff, I think we can all agree it was Peter's only choice. You get a pass this time, Pete. Number 8, The Punisher. Taking a peek into the What If series, Volume 2, Issue 44 to be specific, we find the Venom symbiote taking over Frank Castle rather than Eddie Brock. This was the most people the Punisher has ever taken out in one run. It is extremely violent. I mean, right off the bat, Frank finds Rocky Vance, a guy robbing investors with his inside trading, a guy who is about to take over the electronics industry, and now he doesn't have a face. Awesome. So after this, people obviously start to freak out, guns are drawn, and Punisher Venom starts to figure out just what is it he can do. Webbing? Okay, cool. Can it do bullets? Okay, good to know. The symbiote tried to take over Frank's body, but Frank vowed to end his own life if that was the case. So that's how he remained in control. That's the golden rule. Just put your life at risk and then the symbiote will play along. Just don't tell Don Fortunato that. Number 7, Venomsaurus Rex. Oh, what? Okay. A Venomsaurus Rex can be seen in the pages of Old Man Logan, and while it's a spectacle on its own and really doesn't need any more explaining to be cool, I'm going to explain it a bit more, because it's cool. Old Man Hawkeye actually gave us a little bit more of a backstory for this goopy nightmare in issue 6. So we see the T-Rex before its alternate version is born, just a regular scary old T-Rex. Now, it swallows venom, and for a hot moment, the daring duo believe they've actually gotten off the hook. Imagine if the Venom symbiote bonded with one of those long neck dinosaur boys. Honestly, I think any dinosaur would be terrifying, but the T-Rex, I'm shook. Number 6, Clint Barton. So while Clint may have evaded the symbiote's grasp in Old Man Hawkeye, he wasn't too lucky in the alternate reality of Earth 32323. Beginning with Civil War Volume 2, Issue 2, Clint Barton came into contact with it right after the death of Mac Gargan. After that, Venom Clint was recruited by Peter Parker in order to infiltrate the Iron, Tony's war zone following the superhuman Civil War, in order to steal supplies for Beast to finish his weapon for Project Bellcurve. So he agreed, but upon landing, the group was attacked by Stark Sentinels, and Elektra lost her life. So far, this mission was a rocky one, but anytime Venom's involved, it's at least going to be dangerous, or else, you know, what's the point of reading it? Number 5, Anne Wang, Earth 1051. This version of Anne made her first appearance in Volume 4 of Venom, Issue 27. Her ex-husband, Eddie Brock, ended up taking his own life in this world, which is super tragic, and to make things even lonelier and more cruel, she was the only person to attend his funeral. So she started to hate 3 people at this point. Eddie's father, for having forsaken him, Peter Parker, of course, because he ruined his life and career, and finally, she hates herself for not supporting Eddie enough. So she follows Eddie's trail. She goes back to Lady of Saints Church, but her rage attracted a symbiote, that same symbiote. So after those two became one, she was now determined to get revenge. She started calling herself Agent Venom, but eventually she stopped hating Peter. She started going a little bit to the good side. In fact, when Anne got pregnant with Dylan, Peter was the first she confided in. Yeah, she gave birth to that young boy Dylan who I mentioned earlier, so now it's starting to come full circle. Now you're getting it. Number 4, Ben Grimm, Earth 51838. Making his first appearance in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 304, Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, was the head of security at a supervillain prison. I mean, obviously, he's a giant rock man. I would definitely put him on first. He was under the direct orders of one President Osborn, and one day during his quiet shift, he came into close contact with a symbiote and got a little bit of an upgrade himself. He loves this symbiotic dark side. He hasn't seen nearly as much action as he hoped, so this was considered a good day as well. You love to see it. Ben Grimm, really putting the Grimm in his name. I'll head out, thanks. Number 3, Gwenom, Earth 65. Gwendolyn Stacy made her first appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue 2 simply as Spider-Woman. But by the time issue 24 came out, Matt Murdock wasn't a helpful ally. In fact, he was a little bit evil at this point. See, he created the Venom symbiote, so when Spider-Gwen came into contact with the symbiote, Gwenom was to be born. Matt Murdock actually ordered Alexei Sitchevich to go after her father. The poor guy was beaten into a coma, so Gwenom embraced the dark side here at this point, which you can't really blame her for. All these like dark sides in comic books, I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense. They like killed 9 of their family members. It's like, well, well, yeah. Also, Gwendom's design alone is worth taking a look into, and you can do so yourself starting with Spider-Gwen Volume 2, Issue 25. She's awesome, go check it out. Number 2, Hawkeye. Earth 32323. Beginning with Civil War Volume 2, Issue 2, part of the Old Man Logan storyline, Clint Barton came into contact with it right after the death of Mac Gargan. It's undisclosed what exactly happened and how he got it, but he's got it, so it's trouble. After that, Venom Clint was recruited by Peter Parker in order to infiltrate the Iron. The Iron was Tony's war zone following the superhuman Civil War, and his job was to steal supplies for Beast to finish his weapon for Project Belcurve. Oh, and also he was blind. Great. He agreed, but upon landing, the group was attacked by Stark Sentinels and Elektra lost her life. And that's when Venom Clint took Daredevil's billy club from her body, and he wasn't too happy. He put that billy club right through King Ock's head, violently saving the day, as most of these do. And finally, number 1. Ultimate Venom. Venom of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. We gotta talk about him. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Spider-Man 33. Now the Ultimates are great for the most part. We see major changes to all these heroes that we already love. Thor isn't a god, Gwen becomes Carnage, and Wanda and her brother are kind of in love. It's odd, but it's fun. In this tale, Richard Parker and Eddie Brock Sr. were working together to develop a way to heal humanity. The symbiotic biosuit named Project Venom was the key. This job was adding up to be more than a two-man project, so they partnered up with Trask Industries to help them out. The company eventually realized the potential of the symbiote and figured, you know what, let's just use this as a bioweapon and create super soldiers. What could go wrong? Well, something definitely went wrong. Later on, when Richard and Eddie were on a plane to New York to fight Trask in court, they had secretly created their own version and wanted to pull it out to prove ownership, which, I mean, great idea, but you're talking about an alien beast here. It's gonna get messy. But Eddie pulled the suit out too early while they were still on the plane. Come on, dude. And that's how that plane went down in the Ultimate Universe, which obviously makes sense. And as a student, Eddie Jr. began studying a sample of that Venom project with Dr. Kurt Connors, and Peter took a piece to study himself. Now you're starting to figure out what's gonna happen. After Peter spilled a drop on his hand, he got the black suit makeover, cranking his powers up to 10. He was now untouchable. But when a robber shot another man, this triggered Peter. It literally reminded him of Uncle Ben so much that he went full Venom. He just made a mess. It was not good at all. He lost the symbiote after getting tangled in electric cables, and the only parts left were in his bloodstream, and also the other samples left in the lab, which, yes, Eddie ended up also finding.
Coming in at number 10 is Hybrid. Hybrid is the fusion of 4 of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes into a single symbiote. Riot, Lasher, Phage, and Agony all melded together and bonded to Scott Washington, a guard at the Vault, the supervillain prison. Allowing them to go free, Scott was fired and went through a pretty rough time, losing the use of both of his legs as well as his brother. 4 symbiotes, after reuniting with Scott, bonded with him, giving him back the ability to walk. The symbiotes, funnily enough, actually try to curb the anger inside Scott, but then again, since his symbiote was originally 4 different entities, Scott has to deal with 4 different voices inside of his head. Kind of a downside in my opinion. Unfortunately, after Scott got his revenge on the X-Easy gang that had crippled him, Eddie Brock, Venom, tracked down and took out Washington in order to eliminate all the evil symbiotes, which he didn't even do because the 4 symbiotes that made up Hybrid survived, were separated, and turned over to the United States government as a special symbiote team. Coming in at number 9 is Scream. Donna Diego was a mentally disturbed woman who eventually became involved with the Life Foundation and later became a host for the last Life Foundation symbiote, the most powerful of Venom's first offspring, Scream. The Scream symbiote had gone off on her own away from the 4 that became Hybrid. Bonding with Donna, they became a villain at first and encountered both Spider-Man and Venom before she struck out, attempting to find a way to peacefully bond with her symbiote, although Donna was led into a trap and defeated by Venom anyways. Her powers are very similar to other Venom symbiotes, except with a few notable exceptions, such as her ability to extend her hair into tendrils. Gotta love that prehensile hair. She was also strong enough to defeat all 4 of her brothers, and Scream also controlled Donna's body after the woman had passed away, which is crazy considering symbiotes are parasites and need to live inside a living host to survive. Later on down the line though, after Andrea Benton, who was the host for the Symbiote Mania, was possessed with a demonic hellmark, she bonded with a Carnage Reborn Scream symbiote. After After it was defeated, the symbiote's remains were taken and used alongside a sample of the anti-venom symbiote to create a brand new version known as Silence, gaining a new corruptive touch deadly to other symbiotes. Number 8. Sleeper. The Sleeper symbiote was very different in comparison to others birthed of the Venom alien. The youngest son of the Venom, Sleeper was allowed to develop and incubate in a safe environment before attaching himself to a host, which gave it some notable differences and advantages. For starters, Sleeper had an altered appearance and didn't take on some of the characteristics of the Venom symbiote, like the big Spider-Man like white eyes. He also didn't become a killing machine like most other symbiotes. It was mature and cool. Well, maybe a little bit smug. He has increased cognitive functionality, allowing Sleeper to take a much more measured approach to combat rather than just diving in head first like other symbiotes do. Sleeper is actually so intelligent that it lobotomized its host, Telkar, and used him as a puppet in order to avoid being influenced by the Kree warrior. Other than its unique look and intelligence though, Sleeper also developed unique abilities like being able to bend light to camouflage itself and release neurotoxins that can put its enemies to sleep. Pretty neat symbiote if I do say so myself. Number 7. Carnage. Carnage is the first major offspring of Venom, and he is literally insane. Being a red symbiote, Carnage is quite a bit more volatile than others of his already violent race. He is unpredictable and possibly even stronger than Venom in terms of raw power, but he becomes even crazier after bonding with serial killer Cletus Cassidy. As Cletus was already a serial de-lifer before becoming Carnage, the extra aggression caused by the bonding with a symbiote only made him more cruel and more dangerous. Carnage was such a threat to Venom that the Lethal Protector decided to form a truce with his enemy Spider-Man. Carnage was able to create weapons as well as crazier powers like traversing data and phone lines to attack people on the other side. But Cassidy's Carnage is actually pretty weak if you compare him to some of the symbiote's other hosts, like Norman Osborn, who bonded with the symbiote and then used his Goblin Serum to become the utterly terrifying Red Goblin, or when it bonded with a fraction of the power of a symbiote dragon. It even bonds with a great white shark at one point, except other symbiote-controlled marine life completely destroy him after Eddie Brock, King in Black, sentenced Carnage to pass away. And at number 6, it is Toxin. The son of Carnage, Toxin was believed to be the most powerful symbiote ever created, being the 1000th symbiote in the lineage of Venom, with Venom being the 998th and Carnage being the 999th. The raw power of Toxin was so great that he was feared even by the King in Black Null, creator and leader of the symbiotes. Carnage became aware that he was pregnant with a new symbiote. However, even before the birth, he felt only disgust for his future newborn, for fear that it would become more powerful than him, but also because he was grossed out that, normally being a male, he could even be quote-unquote pregnant with a symbiote in the first place. I don't know, he's kind of weird. He therefore resolved to eliminate his offspring. Luckily for Toxin, Venom, who quickly learned the news, decided to protect the new symbiote and take him under his wing. So, trained by Venom and bonded with a New York City cop named Patrick Mulligan, Toxin's powers remained restrained and focused on doing purely good. His childlike personality prevented him from unleashing his full power, which is great because he has quite the power set. Toxin resists better heat and sound than other symbiotes. He can track anyone and has all the combined strengths of both Venom and Carnage. More recently, Toxin also developed a venomous bite, which is kind of null and void because his bite alone could probably take out anybody. Mulligan was eventually killed and his symbiote forcibly bonded to Eddie Brock before it found a new host named Bren Waters during the King in Black event.
Number 5. Mayhem. This next symbiote is actually May Parker, and this comes from the What If world where Norman Osborn clones the child of MJ and Peter Parker, but that's not all he did. He also turned her into a human symbiote hybrid by genetically mutating her. So now she has both Spider-Girl's powers and the symbiote's powers. That's pretty strong. And since she's a hybrid and she has both powers of both super beings, her weakness isn't the same as a symbiote, so they kind of balance each other out. So if you're trying to take her out, good luck. Number 4, Raze. Making his first appearance in Carnage Volume 2, Issue 10, Raze was spawned by Carnage, and the symbiote bonded with a special agent named Claire Dixon during this ritual that involved the Darkhold and the Elder God Cthon. The symbiote was tearing it up for a little while until it met its fate only 6 issues later. Yeah, Jubilee actually absorbed it all in order to take out its creator, Carnage. Thank God, I mean, because this thing was well on its way to just leveling the planet. I mean, any longer than 6 issues and this thing would have been a pretty big issue. Number 3, the Red Goblin. Green Goblin plus Carnage equals bad news, that's for sure. Appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 798, Norman Osborn stole the Carnage symbiote, and after that, well, all hell just broke loose. But Peter Parker injected the serum into the Green Goblin and fused with nanites to chill him out. No more powers and no more crazy stuff. Quiet time, okay. Now Norman used the Carnage symbiote to eject all of the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mashup, becoming the Red Goblin. The rare weaknesses that the symbiotes do have went away once the two had merged, almost like Spider-Girl, who I just mentioned. That's right, if you think you can use sound or fire to level the Red Goblin, think again. The Green Goblin was fine with things like that, so now the Carnage symbiote isn't affected by those things as well. Even the bombs that he throws are like these Carnage bombs that have like faces that bite you. God, it's so scary. Number 2, Toxin. Born from Carnage, symbiote number 1000, we have Toxin, who made its first appearance in Venom vs. Carnage number 2 back in 2004. So when Carnage was giving birth to Toxin, Carnage initially wanted to destroy the spawn. So once Toxin was finally born, Carnage was too weak by the process to even kill it at that point. So Venom, on the other hand, wanted to raise the spawn and train it, and even named it Toxin after itself. New York City cop Pat Mulligan then became the host of the symbiote. Patrick actually left his wife and kid because this thing was too unpredictable and powerful, so he wanted them away from all that noise. Great call, Pat. So Venom and Carnage saw this police officer infused with Toxin and knew that it would most likely end up being a hero with the abilities to shapeshift, unlimited webbing, healing factor, tracking specialties, and could even hide itself in the blood of its host. A pretty good hero, if you ask me. So they both obviously tried to kill it, and of course failed. Toxin stands out from the rest of these symbiotes because, like I said earlier, he is spawn number 1000. So every 1000 generations, the symbiote is born with what's called genetic memory breakdown. And since he was abandoned at a young age, he never really acted like a true symbiote. During a heated battle with Venom and Carnage, Toxin was given a helping hand by the web-slinger himself, Spider-Man. After the unlikely duo defeated Venom and Carnage, Spider-Man gives him the cool dad talk and encourages him, to be better. I like Toxin a lot, actually. He reminds me of a bratty child. I mean, he broke Patrick's laptop after he referred to Toxin as a monster in a blog, and then he tried to steal a bag of laptops to make up for it. So he's trying. He's tough and he's bad, but he's trying. Toxin is the second hero in the symbiote family right after Hybrid. And finally, number 1, Null, the god of the symbiotes. Okay, the guy I mentioned earlier, making his first debut in Venom Volume 4, Issue 3, so all the way before life and creation, before the universe itself even. Ancient deities awaited in the darkness. And once the universe became a thing, Null, the god of darkness, wasn't a fan of the company, and he set out to destroy the Celestials and went to war. So after forging the All Black, a sword of living darkness, in a Celestial's head, which is a cool place to make anything, after getting his ass handed to him, he figured out a new plan. And he realized he can create symbiotes. Okay, let's do it. So he actually manifested himself a symbiotic suit and then went after all the gods. He's recently given the Avengers a run for their money when he arrived on Earth in King in Black, which is quite recent. So if you haven't checked that out yet, it came out last year. Look into it, it's actually a lot of fun.
Number 10. Phage. Phage first appeared in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, which was a 6-issue miniseries from 1993, but he wasn't named until 2012 in Carnage USA number 2. Phage is one of 5 symbiotes forcefully bred out of Venom. The siblings are Agony, Riot, Lasher, and Scream. The Phage would later combine with 3 of its siblings, Riot, Lasher, and Agony, to form the better known Hybrid symbiote. So from then on, we're dealing with Hybrid and Hybrid's bondings. This all came about because of the success of the first Venom offspring, Carnage, and while people always want to repeat success. However, few of the symbiote offshoots have proved as popular or long-lasting as Carnage. Carnage first debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in 1992. That was as a full appearance. Like Venom before him, he had had a cameo appearance the issue prior. And also like Venom before him, his host, Cletus Cassidy, had been pre-established. All factors on top of his design and absolute bloodlust that made him much more memorable of a character than Phage to most. Still, Marvel has been riding the more and more symbiotes ride ever since. And just look at what they've got Kate's doing with absolute carnage. Number 9. Ruin Venom. Runes, depends how you want to say it. This symbiote comes to us from Ruin vs. Venom number 1 in 1995, and has direct connection to Planet of the Symbiotes, which was a 5-issue event from 1995, and actually had to do with the fallout over the creation of the 5 forcefully bred symbiotes we just talked about. Also, the planet in question is Earth, don't get excited. Runes is a murder mystery, which I'm about to enemy, well, Ruin, so heads up. Ruin venom involves a symbiote that survived the seeming death of all invading symbiotes from the planet Ark and bonds to Ruin. So, who is Ruin? Well, Ruin was an extreme vampire-like creature created in the 90s who debuted in Sludge #1. He begins framing Venom for murders around town by writing Venom in huge letters next to the victim. Copying Carnage much? Of course the media falls for it. However, Ruin Venom runs into some problems, not only when real Venom comes to investigate, but also when Ruin begins to suspect some of his actions are being influenced. Ruin. Number 8. Kroba. Kroba first debuted in Venom Seed of Darkness #1 in 1997. Are you picking up on just how much Venom stuff was going on in the 90s? There was no escape. If you didn't like Venom, Godspeed. Side note, Kroba's heading on the cover is The Living Darkness, and inside the book, he's called The Abyss That Walked. Pretty neat. So this is supposed to be a story that occurs before the current timeline, well, the then current timeline. Marvel will do this sometimes when they have a tale that really won't slot anywhere but isn't strong enough for a what if, or they're going through a period where they're not publishing what ifs. It's a pretty simple story. Kroba bonds with a scientist, Dr. Don Levy. It tells him that it will help maintain knowledge, you know, the usual, but it tricks him. It's up to Eddie Brock to defeat him. I'm kidding, Eddie isn't Venom. In this story, he's still a not as good as Peter Parker photographer, so he observes and ponders on the nature of man and monster. This one is less hard to understand and more easy to miss. Number 7. ZZZXX. Yes, I said Z. It's Canada up here. This is a more recent addition who debuted in X-Men Kingbreaker #2 in 2009. This symbiote is a Clintar and a mutant, and it eats brains. It was discovered by the Shi'ar. The most interesting thing about this symbiote, aside from its rather random letter-centric name, is how it was weaponized against the Charles Xavier from the Cancerverse, which was a realm introduced in the Realm of Kings crossover comic 2010, a universe ruled by evil organic masses. So the Xavier in this universe was a planet-sized brain, and for a brain eater like ZZZXX, a match made in heaven. This could really have hit the zombie element harder with the symbiote, but I mean, they have Marvel Zombies for that. Number 6. Mania. Mania first debuted in Venom #1 in 2003. This symbiote is a clone of Venom, which given Marvel's history with dragging out perfectly good clone sagas until the entire creative staff behind them is permanently traumatized, I'm amazed a direct clone like this hadn't happened sooner. Also, it was only named Mania in 2011 when Venom relaunched. So this clone was created using a piece of Venom's tongue, which is hardly surprising. That tongue is everywhere. From the start, the symbiote was sadistic, refusing to bond with awkward hosts, instead torturing and killing them, sometimes by pulling up the worst fears from their memories and then acting on those. The thing with Mania is that it's hard to track, because a bunch of things that happen, such as it being reabsorbed into Eddie's symbiote, are no longer considered canon. Now Mania is just kind of around and brought out when necessary, but since Kate's and the ridiculous amount of symbiotes he's been creating, we'll see how some of these other symbiotes fare.
Number 5. Riot. Physically, Riot is probably one of the most strongest Life Foundation symbiotes. It appears to be the largest in size when it comes to natural muscle mass, and its unique ability, which admittedly isn't super unique, is it can create blunt weapons. Or rather, it's not a really unique ability, but more a distinct preference of the symbiote. I mean, all symbiotes can create blunt weapons, but Riot prefers to create blunt weapons, possibly because they possess so much strength, which would bolster their force when it comes to their hits. Like all other Clintar symbiotes, Riot is also weak to sonic and heat attacks, and being part of the hybrid group, prefers to be bonded with the other life symbiotes, or at least near them whenever it can be. Number 4. Venom Clone. This is where Mania came from originally. That whole weird thing I said that I would dive into earlier, here we go. The Venom Clone, as it was originally known, was created from a piece of the Venom symbiote's tongue that came into the possession of the Ararat Corporation. The goal for the clone initially was to use it to destroy all life on Earth. A pretty big goal for just a little piece of Venom's tongue. The clone, however, did somewhat live up to its potential in the sense that, while it didn't kill all life on Earth, it did kill some people, and it did escape. In the end, however, the clone was defeated when it fought against the OG Venom and ultimately was absorbed back into it. Or so we thought. Later on we'd get Mania from this, who technically is part of the clone, but the Venom clone had its whole story before that happened, so I kinda thought it would be fair to count it as a separate symbiote, as Mania was still kind of its own thing. And Mania was very different than the Venom clone, in terms of personality anyways. Number 3. Lasher. I feel pretty pretty bad for putting Lasher up high on this list because I actually like Lasher. But you know, Lasher was once bonded with a dog. Granted, dogs are really cool, so no hate towards dogs, but I just mean when that is where you are in comparison to other giant symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, it makes you seem a little smaller than the rest. Although admittedly, I would love to read a comic that was about Lasher's adventures as a doggo symbiote. More dog comics, please. Lasher's unique ability as a member of the Life Foundation symbiote crew was remote symbiosis, which also admittedly is not the most powerful of skills, though it is quite unique, I think, so it's got that going for it. Also, fun fact, Lasher got its name from this unique power, which we learned about through it being bonded to its dog host. Get it? Lasher. Like a leash. Lasher. You know? Number 2. Poisons. While the poisons aren't actually symbiotes in the sense of alien beings from Clintar, they are symbiotic aliens, and I think are admittedly an overall weaker race in comparison to the symbiotes from Clintar. To me, the poisons feel like wannabe symbiotes, and I know that they're just different, but they are also so similar as well. It just makes me feel like the poisons were trying to be what Clintar symbiotes were, but then they got wiped out because they weren't as powerful. Their weakness ended up being their hive queen. Once she was destroyed, the whole thing fell apart. I guess that's kind of what the King in Black is for the symbiotes of Clintar, except that he was also asleep for forever and they mostly got on fine. And also he can be replaced, as we've seen Eddie Brock become the new King in Black following Null's defeat. Also, Carnage is I think now trying to steal that role. Everyone wants to be the King in Black. Number 1. Crowbar. Crowbar has a really tragic story and was a symbiotic alien that appeared in Venom Seed of Darkness issue number 1. Crowbar was a space explorer and sought to learn more about other civilizations and alien races, as his alien race most valued diversity of mind and of thought. He was corrupted by humanity's darker side and the inner demon of the id, which he came across while bonded to his host, scientist Nigel Donlevy. Eddie Brock ended up defeating Crowbar with a camera flash, as a being described as living darkness, light it turned out was, you know, one of its weaknesses. However, it was really the dark side of humanity that did Crowbar in. Eddie's camera flash snapped it out of the violent rage that he was in, which it turns out had been brought upon by his bond to Donlevy and learning more about humanity. Crowbar was so upset at being corrupted by the darkness of humanity, in order to prevent it from being spread throughout the rest of the cosmos, he decided to take his own life. Pretty weak in terms of his more fragile psyche and weakness to light on a planet like Earth that also has a very bright sun and very bright artificial lights, but pretty strong in terms of how depressing his story is and how it like reflects on humanity and all of the terrible things about us. Strong story, weak symbiote.
Number 10. May Parker, Earth 9997. Unlike the symbiotes of Earth 616, our main continuity Earth, the symbiotes on Earth 9997 were created by the Celestials as antibodies to guard the embryos that they planted into planets. The Venom symbiote was given its form by Spider-Man originally, and then later on to Eddie Brock, and then finally bonded back to the Parker family, but this time to Peter's daughter, May Parker. In Jim Krueger's Earth X run from 1999, instead of keeping spider powers a secret like other powerful Parkers in the family, she actually embraced it. Matt Murdock even helped her figure out her spidey senses. How great is that? We have some help as well. Perfect. But that same symbiote that had been used by her father years earlier ended up finding her again, only the difference now was she was able to control the symbiote. All that training must have paid off. Thank you so much, Uncle Matt Murdock. Number 9. Dylan Brock, Earth 1051. Dylan Brock first appeared in Venom Volume 4 in issue 25. Here, Dylan is conceived by She-Venom, and Dylan was born as a human symbiote hybrid. Now, he was once a kind, charming kid, but when the dark god Null started to get in his head, that side disappeared. He took part of his mother's symbiote and used his own powers to transform it into his own symbiote that he called Codex. He used Our Lady of Saints Church as his ground base for operations, where Codex would force the symbiote to spawn a horde of offspring, just so Dylan could eventually control them all in the future, similar to how Null is running the show. So Codex was responsible for taking the lives of President Thompson, the Tinkerer, and the Green Goblin, and he even turned members of the X-Men and the Avengers into his own symbiote squad. Not bad, Dylan. Not bad at all. For a kid, I mean, you're kinda killing it. Number 8. Bizarnage, Earth 9602. When DC and Marvel join forces, the odd time that they do, usually it's pretty wild. So for this list, we figured we'd bring up the amalgamation of Bizarro and Marvel's Carnage. First appearing in Spider-Boy issue 1, Bizarnage was the result of Project Cadmus's attempt to replace alien DNA. So this beast ended up coming to life instead now. It broke free from its test tube and then just destroyed everybody and everything in its way. So when Spider-Boy finally did arrive to the scene, being a combo of Superboy and Spider-Man, he was almost taken out by Bizarnage. orange. That's how strong he is. But thankfully Spider-Boy was a little bit stronger and he was able to trick it into getting sucked into an energy containment unit. Most amalgamations are fun, but all of them, no matter what, are terrifying. And before we continue on with this list of alternate symbiotes, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. You know those clicks help us, so in turn we can get more content to you and to your eyes and soul. So thank you so much for helping us out. Let's get back to this list. Number 7, The Punisher. What If? What If is currently streaming on Disney Plus, and so far I am loving this show as I did the comics. The What If comics are even more insane though, believe it or not. And in volume 2, issue 44, we find the symbiote taking over Frank Castle rather than Eddie Brock. Now, I thought the Punisher was ruthless and terrifying before, but man, the death toll in this issue alone, it stacks up pretty high. I mean, right off the bat, Frank finds Rocky Vance, a guy robbing investors with his inside trading, one of the worst kinds. A guy who was about to take over the electronics industry, and after Venom Frank's judgment, he now doesn't have a head anymore. Great. The suit was giving Frank a new arsenal of symbiote weapons to use, and eventually it tried to take over Frank's body, as it does for most people. But Frank instead vowed to end his own life if that were to happen, so he remains in control. The guy's scared of symbiote, that's all I have to say. Number 6, Groot. Earth 101. I am Groot. No, how about I am terrifying? That seems more fitting this time around. Yeah, Groot. After he was banished from Planet X for being too kind, too nice, a gentle soul, he then traveled the cosmos looking for a new home, and eventually he found a friend, Rocket Raccoon. Rocket hired nice guy Groot to be his personal bodyguard, which is, I mean, for one, a great call. If I was choosing teams for dodgeball, I'd for sure pick the sentient tree. They got a mean swing. So they got close, and eventually they met the rest of the Guardians as well, Drax and Star-Lord. Now they took on a job to apprehend Gamora, daughter of Thanos, but nice guy Groot convinced them to welcome her aboard as a friend and guardian instead. And that's what they did, thankfully. Now on Earth, Cole Obsidian of the Black Order was being held in Wakanda, and a prophecy tipped off the Guardians that this would happen. So basically, Obsidian is gonna bond with the Venom symbiote and then become literally unstoppable. What a prophecy. Nice, love those. Fortune Cookie's like, oh, really? We can't have that. So now in Wakanda, the team was fighting current host Kraven the Hunter, but after it had left him, it started going for Cole. Prophecy was about to be fulfilled, so good guy Groot jumped right in the way. Groot saved the day with his new powers, but over time he struggled to keep a lock on this dark side. Groot is just too good. He eventually taught the symbiote how to be good as well, and they remained a unit for years. Now when the Guardians teamed up with the Avengers to fight the Black Order, the symbiote returned to its first host, Spider-Man, before saying thank you and goodbye to its friend Groot, of course. A nice symbiote. This is a great point. This is awesome. Number 6, kicks ass. Number 5, Demon. Great name. Coming in hot from Earth 5101, Pavitar Prabhakar made his first appearance in Spider-Man India issue 1. Pavitar moved to Mumbai with his Aunt Maya and his Uncle Bim to continue studying. He got half a scholarship and was determined to keep the success going. His best and only friend for that matter, MJ, Mira Jane, stood by his side. He got his powers through an ancient ritual, which I gotta say, I think that's way cooler than a spider just going on the hand. Now Leon Oberoi, a crime lord of this alternate reality, used an amulet to get himself possessed by a demon. That demon was determined to hold the door open for other demonic forces afterwards. So Pavitar, while being chased by bullies, ran into an ancient yogi who then gave him the powers of a spider. Which sounds great, but when you find out that in this reality's Venom is a century-old demon stuck in an amulet, you get a little nervous for him. Demon Venom was freed by a cult called the Neo-Alvers, and once he was free, nearby towns were just obliterated. You had to set the name Demon, I'm not gonna lie. Number 4, Aaliyah Bell. Making her first appearance in Venom 2099 issue 1, Aaliyah Bell was injured in a crash. The same crash that ended her mother's life, sadly. Now these origin stories are so tragic. It's like you know what's gonna happen, yet you're still thrown off when you read it. She was raised by her father Theo Bell, and Aaliyah was having a hard time at school. Some students were bullying her because of her scars on her arm. Those kids are jerks, don't be like those kids. It's rule number 1. Aaliyah was selected to go under this experimental treatment developed by Alchemax scientist Dr. Russell. But during this treatment, she saw these visions of an ancient dark god. And all these humans bonded together to create this massive chunk of pure darkness. She wasn't having a pleasant go, but her arm, on the other hand, was now back to normal. So she at least felt a bit better in some way. But while a confrontation unfolded with this mean punk rock wannabe chick in school named Bether, a black tendril reached out of her hand and cut off the Alchemax monitoring bracelet. And that was just the beginning. You gotta be better, Bether. Stop bullying people. Number 3, Ben Grimm. Fresh out of Earth 51838, making his first haunting appearance in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man issue 304, Ben Grimm became the head guard of a prison for superhumans, of course under the commands of President Harry Osborn. Okay. While there, that's when he came into contact with the symbiote and became this monstrosity. While the Resistance broke in the prison to break out Dr. Doom, they had to now go head to head with this Venom thing, literally Venom thing. Nice try, guys. Number 2, Ngozi. Ngozi was an excellent track star. She began her comic run in Venomverse War Stories issue 1. One frightful day, however, changed her life forever. She was involved in a horrible bus crash, which in turn paralyzed her from the waist down. Really heartbreaking premise, as are all of these, really. She was outside one day trying to catch a grasshopper for her bug collection afterwards, and that's when she bonded to the Venom symbiote. The symbiote beforehand had been evading the grasp of Rhino, but when Black Panther was killed in the battle, Ngozi convinced the symbiote to work with her in order to protect those residing in Lagos. The Dora Milaje saw all of this go down. They saw the courage in this new Venom, so they recruited her into their ranks and into Wakanda, where she would then get another life-changing upgrade into that of the new Black Panther. Number 1. Gwenom. Shooting over to Earth 65, Gwendolyn Stacy made her first appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue 2 simply as Spider-Woman. But by time issue number 24 rolled around, Matt Murdock wasn't a helpful ally. In fact, he was a bit evil. Yeah, he created the Venom symbiote in this world, so when Spider-Gwen came into contact with the symbiote, Gwenom was now born. Matt Murdock ordered Alexei Saitskovic to go after her father. The poor guy was beaten into a coma. So Gwenom embraced the dark side here, but you can't really blame her. Also, Gwenom's design alone worth taking a look into, and you could do so yourself starting with Spider-Gwen Volume 2, issue 25. Kicking off the list at number 10, Venom. Now, of course, we gotta start with one of the more well-known symbiotes, making his first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man 252 as a black suit and nothing more, but it wasn't until issue 299 when he made his Venom debut. Venom was initially attached to Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and before that it even bonded with Deadpool briefly. He's an anti-hero and he got the spotlight with Tom Hardy playing Eddie Brock in their solo adventure film. So once Spider-Man released the symbiote and it bonded to Eddie, he became stronger. He got unlimited webbing and regeneration, he got all that good stuff, and Spider-Man just called him out. And he realized that this suit is alive. So after Eddie Brock got fired, after Spider-Man called him out, Eddie was of course eager for revenge, so he eventually bonded with the symbiote at the Bell Tower, and naturally they both wanted to go after Peter Parker in their own ways. In an early issue, he gets Peter with this sticky trap, kind of like a saw trap, where he webs him up against the bell, and then he waits for the hammer to hit the bell where his head is. So it's kind of gruesome. So it's pretty messed up right off the bat. So before the human stuff, he was actually created by Null. Like I said, that dark elder god who I'll be getting into a little bit later on. Venom is not the strongest of the symbiotes, but since the symbiote retains Spider-Man's powers, he puts up a pretty gnarly fight. And before we get to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great because it really helps us out here at the channel. You guys rock. Thank you so much for supporting. Now we'll get back to the list. Number 9, Scream. Making its first appearance in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, this scary looking symbiote is one of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes. Meet Donna Diego, a Life Foundation volunteer bonded with the symbiote and became Scream. She even made a fun appearance in the Venom movie. So Donna Diego, a security guard from the Life Foundation, bonded with the symbiote. Now, she helped new hosts deal with the new symbiote merging. I imagine it's not too comfortable to have an alien race inside of your head and your blood and all that stuff. It's probably pretty alarming. Now, the coolest thing about her is that she can use her hair to fight, so she's pretty unique to watch in action. Now, if you saw the Venom movie, you of course got the chance to see Donna Diego, played by Michelle Lee. Now, in the comics, she went like 20 years without actually having a proper name, believe it or not. She didn't don the name Scream until a toy line from Toy Biz dropped the action figure in the 90s, and they just called it Scream. So there you go. Number 8, Carnage. What do you get when you mix a mentally unstable serial killer with the offspring of the Venom symbiote? Well, you get a mess. You get a very, very big mess. Carnage, making its first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 360. Carnage is a symbiote that is the offspring of Venom, so its host is none other than Cletus Cassidy. Cletus was sharing the same prison cell as Eddie Brock in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 344. So while Cletus was planning on stabbing Eddie Brock, the Venom symbiote comes out to the rescue. And after Brock is reunited with the Venom symbiote and breaks out, a piece of that symbiotic material attaches itself to Cletus, becoming Carnage. Carnage is terrifying. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing him in the Venom sequel. He's played by Woody Harrelson. It's going to be so loud and so gory. Hopefully it's rated R. Hopefully. If Marvel learns anything, it's that some stories need to be rated R. Number 7, Hybrid. Making its first appearance in Venom, Along Came a Spider, issue 1. Once the Venom symbiote was taken by the Life Foundation, it was forced to create new spawns from its Clintar seeds. These spawns were meant for these mercenaries to become super soldiers, which is, sounds cool, but it's probably not a great plan at all. And as you can probably guess from the name itself, itself, hybrid is a mix of 4 of these different Life Foundation symbiotes combined. Those 4 being Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony. Now, all these symbiotes combined sounds cool, but what do they do exactly? Well, Scream, like I said earlier, uses his living tendril hair to choke out enemies. Agony can spit acid, so cool. And Lasher uses tentacles coming out of his back, and Phage forms blade-like weapons, so that's quite a combo already. Scott Washington, a guard at the supervillain prison, the Vault, watched as the 4 symbiotes escaped their containment, and they all temporarily bonded with him. What a shift. So after the symbiotes fused with Scott, not only did he regain his ability to walk, but he also discovered that they were not really a threat, and that they were in fact in a lot of pain during their experiments. So Scott listened to his heart and the symbiotes and set them free. Now, it's important to note that Scott Washington actually has a lot of anger inside himself. While normally the symbiotes would encourage the host to commit these crimes and lash out, Hybrid kind of did the opposite. Strong, but nice. Number 6, Anti-Venom. Also an anti-hero. This non-sentient symbiote made its first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 569. Anti-Venom was born at the Feast Center in New York City. So in the New Ways to Die story, Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote have actually parted ways, and Eddie Brock has cancer, so it's looking not great for Eddie right now. So in comes Martin Lee to save the day, and bam, cures the Big C. But in doing so, he infused trace amounts of the leftover Venom symbiote with his white blood cells. So while that was cooking up inside, Mac Gargan, the Scorpion, was part of the Thunderbolts, and he was the current host of the Venom symbiote. So this anti-Venom comes along and fuses with him, and it's pretty sweet. Being one of the white blood cells, he actually has the ability to heal people. He can sense if you have something going on inside of you, like an infection or a disease, anything like that. And he can create antibodies to attack whatever that is. Flash Thompson even wore the suit in the storyline. It's pretty fun, you gotta check it out.
Number 5, Anti-Venom. The Anti-Venom symbiote was created when Venom bonded with Eddie Brock after the man was cured of cancer by Mr. Negative. So thanks to Mr. Negative's healing powers, Eddie's antibodies gave birth to a new kind of symbiote when Venom tried to rebond. Inverting the black and white of the original Venom symbiote, Anti-Venom is now mainly white instead of black. Nice. Oh, right, and he has different anti-symbiote powers. His touch is basically caustic to symbiotes and can destroy them with long enough exposure. Anti-Venom can cure people affected by things like radioactivity, parasites, diseases, and substances. He still has all the enhancements afforded by a symbiote. To make this symbiote even more impressive, Anti-Venom is resistant to heat and sound, the symbiote's most significant weaknesses. After Flash Thompson, Agent Venom, eventually lost the Venom symbiote, he bonded with an artificial replica of the Anti-Venom symbiote that he continues to use even after his death and recent resurrection. So I thought he was at least worth a mention here as well. Number 4, Bedlam. Following Dylan Brock's debut as the new Venom on Earth, and Eddie Brock taking on Null's former role as the Symbiote King in Black, Eddie was traveling the galaxy, inhabiting different symbiote bodies when he arrived in the Garden of Time, being transported to the future. While there, he encountered other Kings in Black, with one in particular standing out. Bedlam, who was unstuck in time, was a giant symbiote powerhouse even compared to other Kings in Black throughout time. Bedlam is unfathomably strong and possesses some rather useful abilities to boot. Like Eddie himself, Bedlam is able to possess and control other symbiotes. He can also project his consciousness into the past and future, allowing him to give Brock a real run for his money. He bites off Brock's arm and is seemingly prepared to devour him completely, though he ends up fleeing after being distracted by Finnegan, which is another King in Black. So there's too many of them. Way too many. And number 3, it's Venom himself. Chronologically, in Marvel Comics, other symbiotes had come before, but Venom was the first to appear and the one that set the symbiotic ball rolling. After being rejected by Spider-Man, the alien Venom bonded to Eddie Brock, a disgraced reporter who also hated the Spid. The two became a lethal protector anti-hero. Venom is not the strongest of all symbiotes by any means, but he's certainly one of the most persevering. Venom has been tested against more dangerous symbiotes and always comes up on top because he's willing to sacrifice everything to keep the world a safer place. He's proved he can conquer the urges of his race and become a force for good. Because of his unbreakable spirit, Venom was recently powered up by the God of Light itself, allowing him to defeat Null once and for all, allowing Eddie Brock to become the new King in Black. As for the symbiote, Venom has recently bonded with Eddie's son, Dylan Brock, and they are both acting as a hero on Earth. Long before that, though, the Venom symbiote had also been taken by the United States government, sedated, and it was bonded to decorated soldier Eugene Flash Thompson. Thompson's training and great guy morals, mixed with the neutered mind of the Venom symbiote, gave him control over the alien suit. So he mixed the symbiote's capabilities with his weaponry to become Agent Venom, which was also technically Venom, so I'm including him here as well, just like up before. Number 2, Grendel. Grendel himself is a symbiote dragon, which is really cool. He was created billions of years ago by the Clintar or symbiote god Null, manifesting itself from his own blood. The symbiotic dragon, alongside others like him, rampaged across the cosmos for billions of years with the purpose of attacking and slaying pantheons of gods in Null's name. It was actually more like Null was remote controlling the dragons to do his bidding, but hey, you know, tomato tomato. Grendel is considered far more powerful than a standard symbiote and is capable of annihilating godlike beings. Standard symbiote weaknesses to fire and sonic weaponry are not as threatening, and these dragons could actually breathe fire and shoot energy blasts. They are extremely fast, traveling through space at speeds similar to the Silver Surfer, and they're tough as nails. The Grendel could merge with other dragons and symbiotes to create a super large entity, making it even more dangerous. For a time, Carnage was in possession of a fragment of the Grendel symbiote and was able to create his own army, gain the powers of a spirit of vengeance, resurrect Scream and make her part of his army, and was powerful enough to warrant an entire team of A-list Avengers to try and defeat it. Grendel is awesomely terrifying. And coming in at number 1 is All Black. I mentioned Null when talking about Grendel, but the problem is that Null himself is the god and creator of symbiotes, but he himself is not a symbiote. But being their father, basically, he deserves mentioning at the very least. But for this point though, how about we talk about the very first symbiote he created? All Black. Initially born as the Necrosword, was the first symbiote ever created from the shadow of the evil deity and softened with the divine power of a slain celestial head. It was basically a sword, created from living darkness, and it gives its wielder an exceeding level of power and capability, enough to be able to slay gods. After removing the All Black away from Null, the alien Gore is corrupted by both his hatred of gods and the dark symbiote itself, and he continues the butchering of the gods started by Null. Now, long after Gore's defeat, in the King Thor timeline, King Thor uses it to stop Galactus from consuming the Earth. But then the All Black connects to Galactus, who becomes Galactus the World Butcher. So then when Ego the Living Planet arrives, the All Black goes to Ego and transforms him into the Ego the Necroplanet, who then eats Galactus. Very confusing. But then, the Ego is destroyed by this timeline's Loki, who takes the All Black Necrosword and becomes Loki the All Butcher. This sword needs to just chill out for ever, please. It's too much.
At number 10, we have Thunderbolt Ross. Not usually referenced as a host of a symbiote, General Thaddeus is affected by gamma radiation and transformed into the Red Hulk. He even gets himself a membership to the Avengers, but people often forget that he himself was also overtaken by the Venom symbiote. During a crucial moment while Blackheart is attempting to merge Sin City with his own dimension, Ross is granted both the Spirit of Vengeance and the Venom symbiote. This makes him the only character to ever don the titles of Hulk, Ghost Rider, and Venom all at once. Maybe people forget simply because his other abilities overshadow the moment he spends as Venom, which makes sense. There is a lot going on for this character in that short period, but he's still a legit Venom host no matter which way you slice it. At number 9, we have Dr. Carlin Malice. This host may sometimes be left on the sidelines simply because he was never quite as powerful as Carnage or Venom, or even any of their other offspring for that matter. This character was something of a superhero fanatic who made it his goal to become one himself. He was taken over by the Carnage symbiote, which allowed him to walk again, having previously been paralyzed from the waist down. But something about his story led him to be swept under the rug both by superheroes within his world and readers alike. It's most likely due to the fact that he actually became a human/symbiote hybrid and actually survived the process of being taken over by Carnage, so his powers weren't quite as impactful as time went on. He was also second to the Cletus Cassidy Carnage, which left him with big shoes to fill. and maybe some just argue he never did. At number 8 we have Mavis Trent, or Payback. Mavis Trent is one of the only case examples where a symbiote bonded with a host and didn't turn them into a supervillain. Payback probably doesn't get spoken about as a symbiote very often, possibly for this exact reason, in that she doesn't resemble the usual telltale signs of a symbiote. She's part of the True Believers team and often appears in a state of bliss, actually having the ability to fly, on top of the usual speed, stamina, and strength increases. There isn't much info about her online, but it can be assumed that perhaps her legacy was hidden by her unusual behavior and power set as a symbiote. She also has powers to harness electricity, which is not a typical power granted by a symbiotic bond. But alas, she is a symbiote through and through. At number 7 is Carla Unger. Only turning into Carnage for a short period of time, Carla Unger is one of the less discussed symbiote hosts. Working in Morse Laboratories, she was running tests on a Carnage symbiote sample that was donated by Spider-Man to learn more about its origins and nature. And as we already know, symbiotes often respond very actively to hatred or resentment, so when Carla receives a call from her abusive husband, the tissue sample jumps up and enters her body through her left eye, because she gets all enraged. When she arrives home, she is taken over by Carnage entirely and kills the abusive husband, Will. Then this version of Carnage goes off and attacks Morse Labs before abandoning Carla at a gasoline station outside of the city. And then when Carnage quickly finds another host, it turns right back around and kills Carla. Perhaps this is one of the lesser known hosts because she is killed pretty quickly after being introduced, but she was cool enough while she lasted. At number 6 we have Groot. As much as people may know this happened, nobody really considers Groot as part of the list of symbiote hosts. Maybe it's because he was turned at the same time as the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Or Rocket Raccoon and Drax at least. The way that this happens, for those of you who don't know, is that Agent Venom had been traveling through space with the Guardians when the symbiote started to communicate with the hive mind once again. And although the symbiote seems to have been tamed at this point, it begins to respond to its instinctual nature and detaches from Agent Venom, taking over a number of heroes, including Groot. Groot Venom then wreaks havoc on the ship, breaking everything in its path, yelling out, "I am Venom," which is a fun little touch.
Number 5. Endo-Sim Armor. This first debuted in the Superior Iron Man #1 in 2014. So in 2014, Marvel had an event called Axis, which many do not remember too fondly. Cliff notes: Avengers and X-Men versus the Red Skull controlling Xavier and Onslaught. After all of this, Tony's personality was flipped, so now he was Dark Tony. And so he created the Armor Mark 50, a smart liquid metal mesh incorporating symbiote elements. What could go wrong? Also, I can't hear liquid metal without thinking about Terminator 2. It's actually kinda sad. This was a mindless artificial symbiote that was entirely controlled via artificial intelligence, and then cast aside when Tony's personality flipped back. Superior Iron Man was an interesting time. 100% it just existed because of how well Superior Spider-Man had done. But you know, that one had stakes. Shots fired, I'm sorry. I actually have a soft spot for the aesthetic of this armor. Number 4. Magic Venom. Getting real recent now. Magic Venom debuted in Venom Volume 4 number 13 in 2019, and has ties to the War of the Realms event. The one that people on the outside like to make fun of because the lead villain is Malekith, the dark elf from Thor 2: The Dark World. Well, he was from elsewhere first, but that's where many know him from now. And there's been this odd campaign to make Thor 2 relevant again. It's been very interesting. War of the Realms actually starts with him already having conquered all the other realms, so you're stuck in the lamest one. This one, Midgard, Earth. Again, I live here. Give me Alfheim or Valheim, somewhere else. Anyways, everyone has to band together and stop him. In this arc, Eddie and Venom are separated, so he is given a Dream Stone by a dark elf who is hoping to recruit him. The Dream Stone acts as an artificial symbiote, but is a mindless one, and Eddie ultimately uses pieces of the suit to save civilians. Number 3. Spider-Man India. So Spider-Man India was a miniseries that lasted 4 issues in between 2004 and 5, and blended elements of Spider-Man mythos with more mythological elements. The concept was conceived by an Indian director who had met with Stan Lee to discuss creating an Indian superhero. Symbiotes in this universe are demons, fanged, tusked demons who once ruled but were captured in an amulet. When the amulet was found, it turned the host into the Green Goblin. The demon would hop from the Green Goblin to Spider-Man, but be expelled, but before this it is called Venom. The amulet is destroyed, but not Venom. He's always a menace, no matter the Earth. Number 2. The Beyonder. For this version, we have to go to yet another one of Marvel's humor issues. These issues have brought us such gems as What If Black Panther Was White? Now I give you The Beyonder. Just let the pun wash over you. Live in it. Be the pun. This comes to us from the what the exclamation mark, a self-parodying comic series for silly jokes. Its tagline was the Marvel mag of mirth and mayhem. The Beyonder is this universe's version of the Beyonder, who gives Spider-Ham a version of the black uniform. But it's not a symbiote. I just want to tell you about the Beyonder. It's fun to say for me, but it's probably not fun for you to listen to. Number 1. Scorn. Scorn first debuted in Carnage number 5 in 2011. So Scorn was created out of a piece of Carnage left in space after Carnage was torn in half by the Sentry, but he got better. The Sentry may be one of the most powerful beings out there, but Carnage has plot armor and sells comics, so take that, Sentry. The pieces are collected to attempt to create prosthetic limbs, so the first thing that the symbiote bonds to is a prosthetic arm. Because of this, Scorn can bond to technology. Now this is an element that some find confusing, and also there are other story elements that make Scorn a bit convoluted. Things like how Cassidy was alive and had been preserved by Carnage and was repaired by these prosthetics. Again, you can't kill Carnage. Scorn was eventually corrupted by Null, the symbiote god, and started a cult to worship him. She was killed by Carnage after offering herself to him. Absolute carnage. There is so much carnage going on right now.